so excited. Sorry.
Fantastic. Of course, it's great to meet you. How's everything going?
All right. I'm really excited about joining this course, and I'm really excited about getting a chance to give myself a refresh or restart so that I can hit my goal score.
Of course, fantastic. Well, I'm excited to have you on board. What's the biggest challenge that you're facing right now where you could use some support?
Well, I think it's just, um, I see. I guess figuring out where to start, right? So I, of course, got your course, your 3 month course, right? And or study guide, I'm sorry. And I noticed that I tend to gravitate to reading comprehension more than I do logical reasoning and logic games. So I'm trying to figure out if I should just start with logic games or start with logical reasoning because I already know that I gravitate more towards reading comp and I want to make sure that um, I'm working on the areas that I guess I struggle the most with so that I can build those skills and really understand the content so that I can be in that 170 zone.
Of course, you can start wherever you like. So, if you like reading comprehension, maybe logical reasoning is a good next step because it's in between games and reading comps. You can find the elements of what you like in reading comprehension and what works for you there, and then apply it to logical reasoning. So, viewing the stimulus like it's a passage.
Okay. Okay, that is really helpful. I wanted to ask you about the review process, which I think is another area of support. I noticed that your review method is actually different from what I have been introduced to initially. You call it like the Socratic review, and so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. I want to make sure that I'm reviewing things properly. And you talked about how a lot of students read, they do a problem, they read, the answer, and based on whatever it is, they'll get it right or wrong, and then they'll just kind of move on, and not really understand why they got it right, why they got it wrong, or even like a pattern of of where they were finding, a struggle. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. And the best place to find out more about it is actually in some of those course lesson videos. I have many workshops, many deep dives where I actually walk through the Socratic review method live in class. I'll open up a Google Doc, I'll open up a whiteboard, and we'll do it live together, everyone in class. And basically what we're doing is we're looking to see where exactly your misunderstanding may come from. In logical reasoning, for example, is it the stimulus, the question stem, or the answer choices? So we may look to translate or redefine what's going on in the stimulus. We may look to make sure we understand exactly what the question stem is saying and what might have led a student astray. And then for the answer choices, what makes the wrong answer seem appealing and what ultimately makes it wrong, and what makes the right answer seem unappealing and what ultimately makes it correct. Of course, a lot of it comes down to the very specifics of the language itself. So we're looking to see and match the language in the choices to the language in the stimulus and see where they might line up, see where they might not line up.
Okay. Okay, that is super helpful. I realized after watching your videos that I was not reviewing things in depthly. What you stated in a lot of your videos is like the key to having uh, the mindset of the test maker, right? And so that really challenged me to switch gears a little bit and say, okay, I'm looking at it from the wrong perspective. I also had a question about incorporating timed, sections. So where I'm at is where I'm still transitioning from like the mastery level to incorporate timing, and I want to make sure that in that transition that I'm making sure that I'm still keeping up with like the mastery, but not pushing myself so much so that I'm trying to take everything so fast but not like get things correct. And part of taking the LSAT is that accuracy component, combined under the test or the timing pressure. So could you talk about a little bit of how to incorporate timing? Is it okay to, say, for example, with logical reasoning and specifically main point questions, if you have those, down pat, can you start testing yourself or timing yourself on specifically those questions to start building speed with those specific test or question type?
That's a great question. It's one I get a lot. I can understand if you have 25 or so questions in approximately 35 minutes, you could then aim to do a logical reasoning question in maybe a minute 20, a minute 15, something along those lines. But questions vary in difficulty significantly. So, main point might be on the easier side on average. So, maybe you'd want to typically do those in less than the average amount of time. But there are also some tougher main point questions. And in reality, you're never going to be asked to do a given specific question in a certain amount of time down to the minute and second. So for that reason, I actually would not recommend timing individual LR questions, nor would I recommend timing individual games to 8:45 or individual passages to 8:45 as well. I would treat the sections holistically and work on your pacing so that you're completing the entire section in 35 minutes standard. And then how you allocate your time within that is totally up to you.
Okay, that's definitely good to know. And I had, oh, sorry, one last question. I wanted to know, how much does sleep play a part in, the process? I know you in your videos talk about making sure that you do yoga or do different things to help, relieve stress. And I know that, what you eat, and sleeping does play a part. But like if you're, don't have like necessarily a set bedtime, or if you're, trying to, I guess, set a solid schedule to keep yourself accountable, how much does sleep play in that?
That's a great question. I mean, I could tell you sleep is important. It might be
Of course.
useful for you to discover it for yourself, though. So let's say, how do you perform when you've gotten enough sleep? How do you perform when you haven't? So, standard, let's say, ideally 7 to 8 hours versus 5 hours. Do you notice a difference there? You said you don't have a set sleep schedule when you go to bed. I mean, you could set it for yourself, right? Nobody's going to assign it to you, but you could say, I've got to be in bed, lights out, screens off by, let's say, hypothetically, 11 p.m. And then wake up the same time every day, go to bed approximately the same time every day, and see how that works for you if you're doing well and you're feeling well versus randomness based on circumstance or just whatever happens that day.
Okay. Well, I mean, that makes sense. I was just curious to see like if there were like certain studies I should be looking at, indicating, these, how many hours of sleep, regularly is going to help you, get so many gains, right? Per month or whatever, as far as towards whatever your score, your goal for your test is. So I think that that's definitely interesting, and I will be making sure to do research on that. I have another question
Sure,
as
sure. Of
well.
course. I just want to stay on this for one more minute, though. I mean,
Go
you
ahead.
could look up all the studies you like, and I could tell you sleep is important. I think you also probably know it's important, or you wouldn't be asking
Yeah,
me the question, right? So,
of
I guess
course.
the issue is, I mean, do you need objective third party data on this, or do you just need to try it out for yourself and set up the habits and routines for yourself so that you can meet the goals you have for yourself? Because you might know theoretically it's a good idea to get enough sleep, just like exercise, is good. Eating
Yes.
healthy, is good. These are all fairly common sense everyday things that we know in the abstract, but can be difficult to apply due to external factors or due to temptations or just due to how Silicon Valley has engineered social media to be addictive, right? Like these are all things that we know on one level, but then you've also got to set up the structure for yourself so that guesswork, chance, temptations don't play a role.
Right. So I have started a journey, since we're talking about this, of turning off my phone, turning off electronic devices, and just saying, okay, I'm going to, take a break and it's been very helpful and very enlightening, especially when I'm wanting to be like focused specifically on, LSAT or whatever. Having those distractions definitely pull, and then you think you're studying, but you're really not. So, you know, so that's just something that I've like kind of grown into during this process, and I think for me, it's been a transformative process.
That's
Definitely.
incredible. I'm glad to hear it. I mean, that right there is a structural thing you implemented and you've seen the benefits from it already. So you might want to think about what other structural changes you can implement that are just default there for yourself so that you'll be set up for success.
Definitely, definitely. And then I think my last question, or final question, because I think I said it was the last time,
That's okay.
was so this how much to study. And I know you've talked about this extensively, making sure that you don't get the burnout. And so based off your previous videos, I decided to cap it at 6 hours, 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours later that evening, right, with some hours in between for break. And I was wondering, you said, I think the max should be no more than 30 hours. Is that correct, as far as like per week, so that you don't get burned out? But what do you think about introducing different like things on the side, for example, that are not going to take away obviously from, you studying, but that are going to force you to say, okay, I need to allocate my time wisely. This is how much I'm going to do. I'm going to stop. I'm going to take a break and then come back to it, just so that you have a balance. Because I'm also recognizing that this test not only requires so much, but it also requires you to balance things, right?
Yeah, it's an excellent point. Yeah, we do want to avoid the burnout. 30 hours a week, I think, is a generally reasonable maximum amount to put in. In some cases, I think folks could do more if they structure their day right and they don't have too many other obligations. And again, I think this does come back to structure. So one technique, for example, would be using the Pomodoro method, having cycles of work and cycles of break built in by default. There are even apps for this that can help with it. You could set up your daily schedule where you have a break for lunch by default at a certain time. So you might say you'll do 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours after lunch, and that could be it, and you're done for the day.
Okay, so that's kind of how I was doing it, but instead of like, because I looked at the Focus app, I believe that you talked about, how it has like, like every 25 minutes and you can change it. So I've been doing like every like 50 minutes or 55 minutes break, and doing that in cycles. And then also doing some hobbies on the side, like I'd like to do research. And so that's kind of helped me start to balance things out.
Perfect. Love it. I'm glad you're putting it into practice.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, Jocelyn, before we sign off, what would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
I think the biggest insight for me has been I guess like the whole experience, how like we've discussed so many topics, but holistically, they help you achieve. And so that has been, I think, the takeaway is that you can't have just one, you can't be really high on one thing and then really low on something else. Like you have to have a balanced approach. And so I feel like our discussion has given me a better sense of how to be balanced and how to take that approach.
Fantastic. You got it. Well, it was great connecting with you.
Thank you.
Keep in touch if you need anything, and I'll see you in class.
Alrighty. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.